Gaza and the West Bank, just goes into civilian territories, starts beating people, men, women, and children, and carries them into prison. This week, a UN report came out detailing the extent of the abuse. So these thousands of prisoners, some of whom have been in the prisons for years, if not decades, and many of whom are minors, where Israel is the only country in the world where military detention is used against literally minors, children. The report detailed the use of sexual assault, beatings, electrocutions, and shockings, people cramped in cells that are 4 times the maximum capacity, people being starved, dying of starvation in the prison, people's medical needs not being attended to, the shackles causing them to need to amputate their limbs. It's as horrific as you can imagine. And of everything we've heard about Palestine, the horrors of losing a limb from bombardment, the horrors of having your house get bombed, and then the school where you're seeking refuge get bombed, and then the tent in the safe zone get bombed, again and again and again, being a refugee displaced 8 times since the start of the genocide. For all of those horrors, I personally think none of them compare to the horror of being held prisoner by the people of Israel, by the so-called state of Israel, because once you are at the mercy of merciless people, that's it for you. And so for a lot of people who know that their father, their mother, their loved one, their son or daughter has been taken away by the IOF, they don't know if they're going to see them again. They do know that they're not going to have any rights afforded to them, like even here in this prison country where 1% of the adult population is in prison, which is insane. Shame, absolutely shame. Even in the United States, prisoners have rights. In Palestine, that's not the case. Once they're at the mercy of the Israelis, they can only expect ill treatment, and all they have to rely on is God. At the same time, we see, I also wanted to mention the situation of prison around the world. So, first of all, Guantanamo Bay, still open. The detainees from decades ago who were not ever offered a trial, they were just thrown in prison. A bunch of Muslim men were just thrown in prison, not even having any right to a trial. They were famously tortured using enhanced interrogation techniques from the CIA. Enhanced interrogation should be put in quotes. They were waterboarded, they were force-fed until their stomachs burst, horrific things. Several of them actually, decades later, could not be tried. They could not go on trial because one of the Guantanamo Bay detainees was actually tortured so much that he received brain damage, and another one of the Guantanamo Bay detainees was tortured so much that he was considered, quote, too insane to stand trial. He had gone insane from the decades of torture. This is the country we live in, and there's a certain group of people who just don't have rights afforded to them. Now, we know that this affects all people, but especially people from lower income backgrounds and people of color disproportionately, where Hispanic and especially black people in the United States get imprisoned at staggering rates compared to white people, and they get treated much worse at every level of the system, from the cops to the courts to the prisons themselves. This is a common story for a lot of Muslim families where they know people or have been directly impacted by this. Not only getting imprisoned for a crime you did not commit, but getting imprisoned for fighting for your people and trying to help them. This is the state of our world. We've seen it time and again. I also want to mention a few other things that have been going on recently, because Southern New Hampshire for Palestine has been proud to expand our reach and see the oppression around the world and how it's all connected to Western imperialism and Zionism. So first of all, I want to mention, as we've talked in previous rallies about the situation in Sudan and the rapid support forces, the situation in Sudan is now declared a famine. So following the genocide, you have the refugees in Darfur, the massive people outrunning these horrific imperialist armies, and following that, they are now declared to be in a state of famine. In September, it is estimated that 2.5 million people will die of hunger in Sudan if the situation does not change. Finally, I wanted to mention the situation in Bangladesh. You might have heard some things in the news about Bangladesh lately. The student protests in Bangladesh about a they have this quota system. So basically, 30% of the cushy government jobs are relegated specifically to the descendants of those who are the freedom fighters who first founded Bangladesh. And so it's like this weird classism that they've set up. So the students were protesting, saying this is not fair, everyone should have an equal opportunity. There shouldn't be certain families who get privileged just because of who they're related to. Now the situation has escalated far beyond the original purpose of those protests, to the point where in Bangladesh, while we have been protesting on college campuses and seeing the police brutality, in Bangladesh it's gotten worse. It's gotten to the point where the police are shooting at people. A bunch of people have been murdered, including children. Just direct fascism. The prime minister is telling lies left and right. The Bengali people are heartbroken and terrified. There's a curfew imposed, blackout, so that they can't see anything online or post anything online. And the situation has really become one where the government feels threatened. And the moment the government feels threatened, they show their fascist side. We've even seen that here. Things look really nice and civilized, and we all talk about every 4 years, oh, who are you going to vote for? The moment you question them, they show their fascist side. So, all that to say, I know that I have kind of given a coverage of a bunch of different countries, but it's good to stay on the loop on all of it, and I'm very grateful to all of you for coming out here for Palestine and coming out to stand against oppression. It's easy to forget when you're not directly affected. It's very easy. We are all super busy. I know there's a million other things you could be doing, so thank you so much for being here for a cause that is not popular when we are facing the state and we are in the belly of the